Okay, thank you. So, thank you for coming to this last lecture on random matrices. And so I will remind you what we did. So we look at our favorite random matrix. So I think you understood that my favorite is Wigner matrices. But okay. And so we looked at the empirical measure of the eigenvalues. And so we saw that often it converges. And we gave conditions. We looked also at the maximum eigenvalue. And we show that it sticks to the bulk. So if you have noise only, and then you have the BBP transition. So we saw that this property that the eigenvalues stick to the bulk. So here you had this convergence towards this semicircle law, and here you have the lambda max. But what we saw is that so if we just add something one-dimensional, then it will go away. So provided theta is greater than 1. So the signal is strong enough. What we also saw is that there is an important tool, and actually I just got extra question on concentration of measure, but that shows that we have estimates on how random are these quantities. So it's self-averaging. Which says that, so if you look the distance to the expectation of this random variable, so here you have some norm of f, which is like total variation. So this will be as soon as you have enough independence in your random matrix, bounded by something like this. And here actually I also mentioned that so you can improve the speed. So in general this is the best you can do, because if you have for instance entries which are heavy tail, then we can prove the central limit theorem, and we know it's the speed is only 1/square root of n like independent variables. Whereas when it's Gaussian, we can prove that we have the fluctuation will be of order 1/n. So this is when you can have log Sobolev inequality or compact support. And we also saw that we have the same kind of thing for the largest eigenvalue. And then the speed is not as fast because it's just like n. And this is Gaussian. This is also under this assumption. Okay, and so today what I would like to address, question I would like to address is about large deviations. So large deviations. And so the question is complementary to this one. So we saw that we have a big probability to converge to somewhere, and what you would like to do is to estimate what is the probability that you do something else. Okay, so typically, so I would like to estimate the probability that this is close to some nu. So I don't know, something like this. And here's some rate. And so what this means, I mean, when I put this kind of dirty symbols, so this means that the probabilities at the distance, so you can undo the space of probability measure with distance compatible with the weak topology. So you look at the volume of small balls, and you take the logarithm, you divide by the speed, so gamma will be some exponent. So gamma, we would expect that it's in between, well, it's 1 or 2, no, whatever. So this should go when n goes to infinity, and then delta goes to 0 towards minus this I mu, and this should be greater than the same thing with the lim inf, and this should be bounded below by minus I mu. Okay, so large, so do you understand what this is? So you put it here. Yeah. Okay, so this should be here. Okay, so the lim sup is greater than the lim inf, and both are kind of bounded, so it converges towards minus I mu of nu. So this is what I mean by this notation, and you can also ask the same question about the largest eigenvalue. And this should be minus n, so some eta and g of y. So here d of mu, for instance, you can take the supremum over all Lipschitz function as the integral of f mu minus f mu. Okay, so that's the question. So what are the motivations for this? So for instance, you may be interested to have this kind of information when you are doing your test. So as we said, sometimes you want to look at the largest eigenvalue, and you want to test what is happening according whether this largest eigenvalue is going to go here or not. But then you could say maybe it's a signal, but maybe actually it was coming from some deviations. And so it can be interesting to know the exact rate of this deviation. The other motivation is coming from this work that Gérard talked about, where at some point when you want to estimate the expectation of critical points, you're taking some integral over GOE matrices, and in fact what you need is to have large deviation for this guy. We'll talk about that. And so it would be x and theta. And more generally, I think here a lot of people are coming from statistical physics, and it's important to do large deviation when you are coming from statistical physics, because as soon as you want to consider probability measure where you have a potential, typically you will use large deviation to know where your measure concentrates. Okay, more. So that's maybe something I should say. So for instance, imagine that you look at typically in matrix model. Well, in matrix model, we like to look at probability measure where we have some random matrix like the GOE, and then we add some density. Okay, and we are interested to know where this new measure will concentrate. Okay, and if this is a continuous function of the measure, what you can see that the probability under P and V that this guy is going to concentrate close to some nu. You can fix this, because on this set this is fixed. And so this will be minus n gamma integral of d nu. And then you will have this probability under Pn, under your reference measure. Okay, and if you know how to estimate that by this kind of theorem, then what you will know is that this is like 1 over the in n exponential of So minus n gamma I of nu minus integral of v plus integral of v d nu. Okay, so you see that your measure will concentrate on the place where this is minimum, and so you will need to, so you will see that this should go to mu star if mu star minimizes. It's a unique minimizer. In general, it will concentrate on the minimizer of this guy. Unique minimizer of this function. Okay, so large deviation in statistical mechanics are very often a central tool for probabilities to try to understand convergence when you add some density like you usually do in statistical mechanics. Okay, so is there any question on the motivations? Because then I will start telling you what we know about large deviation for random matrices. No? Okay, so what do we know? So what do we know about LDP in random matrices? So for the first case which was handled in the case of Gaussian entries. So you take the GOE. So again, my favorite matrix is a Wigner, but I could say exactly the same thing if I would consider Wishart. So I would consider Gaussian entries. So this means that Xij is going to be n(0)(1) if I is smaller than j. Is going to be n(0)(2) if I is equal to j. And so you can see that maybe I should put n here. And so you see that somehow you can write that this, so the covariance was just chosen so that the density is given in terms of the trace of x squared. Okay, well this is just the Lebesgue measure on the entries. And so, so the point is that you know that you can compute in this case the joint law of the eigenvalues. So if you write that x is O times, so an orthogonal matrix times some orthogonal ones, which will be the matrix made with the eigenvectors, then you can see actually that because the Lebesgue measure will not be affected by this rotation, that the law of x is invariant if you multiply it by an orthogonal matrix on the left and on the right. Okay, because this is invariant, and this also. And when you do the change of variable, which to x associate so the eigenvalues, lambda 1, lambda n, and the orthogonal matrix, so some parametrization of this orthogonal matrix, in fact you can compute the Jacobian of this change of variable. And what you find is that the law of the eigenvalue, so maybe I should go over there. The law of the eigenvalue is explicit and is going to be given. So here z are always the right constant. So it's going to be absolute value lambda I minus lambda j. So that's when you do the change of variable, you find this formula, and in fact it's the only case where you have a simple distribution for the eigenvalue, an explicit one. Usually the distribution of the eigenvalue depends on the eigenvectors, and it's a mess. So that's why Gaussian case was the Gaussian case was used quite a lot, because you can do a lot of computation based on this formula that you can't do in general case. In particular, you can do large deviation, because here this looks really like, you know, some particles which are in the interaction via a Coulomb gas. Okay, so the first theorem, which actually I wrote with Gérard at the end of my thesis, it was published in 1987, is that, so if I look at the probability that so this spectral measure is going to be close to some nu, this is going to be given by the exponential minus n square times some rate function, and I of nu is going to be given by the integral of, so I am going to write it like this way. So minus a constant, and the constant is just the infimum of all measure of this thing, so that it's non-negative. I mean, you see that this should be always non-negative, because it's a probability measure. And and so you take just this constant, like this. And the second thing that we did was to prove the large deviation for the largest eigenvalue. So this time, this was again us, but with Amir Dembo. So maybe I should go over that. Which proves that, so you look at the probability that the lambda max is close to some y. So you take y which is greater than 2, because otherwise if y would be smaller than 2, this would mean that you need to have a deviation of the empirical measure, okay, because you can't converge to the semicircle to the semicircle law if y is smaller than 2. And so this is like exponential minus n, and here you have something quite explicit, and it's going to be 2 to y square root of t2 minus 4 dt, which I denote I of GOE, G of GOE of okay. And let me, is there any question on the result? No. And let me give you a hint on the proof. And the proof is really like Laplace method. Again, so Laplace, I think it's Laplace principle. Okay, so Laplace principle is telling you that if you look at some continuous function, and let's say you integrate it over this is going to behave like the maximum of this function. Okay, so it's something that everybody should know. And why is it the case? Well, you have to see that your density is really close to some function of the empirical measure. So the proof of theorem 1. So I will just give the ideas, and in the notes I put the full proof with all epsilon and everything. But so what you see that if you call this a function of x and y. Okay, I put it in this form because here you see that this function is bounded below, so the integral is always well defined. So if you look at your density, so this is just 1 over the n, and then you can see that, so if you put, so where is my density? Yeah, it's here. If you put this term in the exponential, and you're careful about what you're doing, so you can verify that you have the formula that if you suppressed the diagonal points where lambda I x equal to y would correspond to the case lambda I minus lambda I that you don't want to add. It's this and this, and then I think you have a leftover which is something like 1 over 4 sum of lambda I squared. Okay, it's just, so maybe I forgot the minus. Okay, it's just algebra. You put this as exponential of the log, and you have the product over I smaller than j, which is the sum of the logs. And the sum of the logs of lambda I minus lambda j is really like the integral of the log, so here, under the empirical measure. But you just have to be careful to suppress the diagonal term, because otherwise this would be just infinite. Okay, so now imagine that this is continuous. Continuous as a function of the empirical measure. Well, then the probability that the empirical measure is close to some nu. So this should be like 1 over the n, and this will be fixed on your small ball. This is so exponential minus n squared, and then what you get is d nu x, d nu y, and then you have the probability, so you should keep this guy, which is the fact that your empirical measure is close to nu under this measure. Okay. But here you don't have the n anymore here. So it's really like you have n independent variables. And so you know how to estimate this. This is called Sarnoff theorem. So this is actually of order n. So it's this would be, well, this is of order n. Okay, so this is not going to count because here you have a n square. So it's much bigger. And so if you believe this, somehow by the same kind of trick I just showed before, so you have just estimated the volume of balls, and this is the main term. So the only thing that you have to be careful here is that I didn't put that I don't have to look at the diagonal. But you can imagine that somehow you can prove by some other argument that the diagonal is neglectable. In particular, because you're not going to push mass and measure which have Dirac masses. So you can assume that mu is absolutely continuous or something. Okay, so this is the idea. And all the work is, of course, to deal with the fact that this is not continuous because this function is blowing up and so on. So you have to make sure that it's not continuous, but somehow it's not important. That the place where this function is not continuous are not going to matter. Okay, and for the largest eigenvalue, it's the same type of idea. So you look at the lambda max. So this means that you are going to integrate your probability measure on all the other. So you have some 1 over z tilde n, and so you integrate over all the others. So let's say n minus 1. 1, lambda max, so you have this term which comes once, and then you have all the other term. And actually I can, here I had a 4, I can put the exponential of minus n lambda max square over 4 here, because it's fixed. So I'm just computing the density of the maximum eigenvalue by integrating over all the others. So the point is that this probability measure is very similar to the one I had before, but it's just n minus 1 dimensional. I have one less eigenvalue, but you can believe that still under this measure, the empirical measure will concentrate very fast towards the semicircle law, which is the minimizer of this guy. Okay, and why do I say that? Because if you look at this is the sum 1 over n of the log of lambda max minus lambda I, okay, which is also exponential n of integral of the log of lambda max minus lambda I against the empirical measure, which is n minus 1 dimensional of the other one. Okay? And so what I can prove is that the probability that the empirical measure of the n minus 1 remaining eigenvalue is greater than delta, this is going to go to 0 very fast, like n square. Okay, I can use concentration of measure, whatever. I mean, it's exactly the same kind of flow. And so, because here I'm looking at large deviation on the scale n, I can somehow fix this guy to be equal to the semicircle law. Yes? Okay, I'm just saying that because this is going to converge to sigma on very fast, much faster than deviation of lambda max, I can here replace this guy. And so what I get is that this is approximately exponential minus n, so the lambda max over 4, and here I have plus the n of the integral of log of lambda max minus y against the semicircle law. Okay, and then it's just Laplace method. So that's quite easy, and somehow really comes from the idea of Laplace method. But then, if you want to generalize this kind of result, it's just impossible. You don't know how to do that, just because you don't have, as I said, any formula for the other type of random matrices. So then we had to wait for quite. Yeah. This?
No, that one. The one for the changes.
So what is the origin? I don't know who did that the first time, but I think in physics, yeah, but yeah, all that, yeah. Yeah, I mean it's yeah, it's kind of sold. I don't remember who. It's kind of it's.
No, in fact, it's not. Again, Bouchard did it in Bouchard case. 25 years earlier, the same explicit formula for Johnson.
Yeah.
Which, of course, instead of sum of lambda I squared, you have to
But yeah. No, but I think that Wishart, I completely agree with you that Wishart is the one who invented random matrices and so on and so forth. But I think that from all his formula, he never got any limiting.
No, but the formula itself, he had it, right?
Yeah, so he had the formula, but he didn't get any limiting thing like the semicircle law, the Pastur-Marchenko law. It's called Pastur-Marchenko because of this formula. Yeah. So if you want to see details on how to do it properly, again, it's in in our book with offer on Greg, but it's in many places. Yeah.
Can you, by projection, somehow get the large deviation principle for the largest one from the one from the old second measure?
It's not the same scale.
Yeah, it's not the same scale. Mm.
I have because it would be more.
Yes. So
In fact, you can if you look at the deviation on the other side. While it's smaller than 2, then the large deviation is the max is the large deviation of both. And then you have a projection. And then the large deviation is n squared. But when on this side, it's not the large deviation of both.
Okay, yeah, so you can get it.
you met yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so actually there was a lot of work by Majumdar, where what he did was to look not only on the so what I look is deviation on this side. So I have 2, and so this has weight probability of order exponential minus n. So as I said, if you want to make a deviation here, you have to change the empirical measure. So what you should rather see is something like exponential minus n squared times the infimum. So here is g, and here should be the infimum over all the probability measure mu, which are supported below y. Yeah. And indeed, you can do this kind of computation, and actually, I think Majumdar did it even for finite n to try to see how these 2 bonds would give actually kind of the idea of fluctuations at 2. Because you have a different scale, so he has some explanation why these 2 different scales are creating the n to the 2/3 fluctuation of the largest eigenvalue. So, but again, it was very mysterious, and it's still quite mysterious, but it's less and less mysterious, hopefully, what to do in other cases. And then there was this great work by Bordenave and Caputo. So I think it was in 2012, and then Augéry, so Fanny, in 2016. We consider the case, so they call it heavy tail, but it's heavier than Gaussian. Now you assume, so let me imagine that the Xij are the entries of your matrix. So I multiply by square root of n to compare with a Gaussian. But now I assume that this is going to behave like exponential minus a t alpha. Yes. Minus a t alpha for some alpha which is strictly smaller than 2. And a which is positive. And this is for t large. Okay, so a Gaussian variable will have alpha equal to 2. And and so what they prove is that in this case you have a large deviation principle, but the scale is different. So what they prove is that then, so I'm not going to give you the exact rate function, but somehow what is important is that the rate is different. So it's going to be some I of alpha mu. So this was Bordenave and Caputo, and Fanny Augéry proves a similar result, but for the lambda max, and so it's n alpha over 2. So g alpha of y. Okay, so here you see that actually you still get something which is a bit better than n. So if you remember the concentration, it was on the speed n. So you do a bit better, but when for the concentration of Bordenave, Caputo, and Schaffer, you had no assumption on the entries. Here you have much more assumption, and you get this tail. So it's quite easy actually to understand after the idea to look at that, the mechanism. And the mechanism is as follows. So you have to think about large deviation. How are you going to create this deviation? Okay? And the idea here is that it's enough, for instance, if you want to make a deviation of lambda max, to have one entry which is going to be bigger than usually. So of order 1. Okay, so what this means that the probability of x11 is of order 1. So here you rescale, and this is going to be like exponential minus a n alpha over 2 t alpha. Okay, hopefully, because here you have to multiply t by square root of n. So this multiplied by n alpha over 2. And so you know now that you have seen the BBP transition that if you do that, you are going to create an outlier, typically. Okay, if this is big enough, it's a rank 1 perturbation of a Wigner matrix. Typically, you are going to create a larger eigenvalue. So you know that the speed should be at least like this. The probability to make a deviation are bigger than in the Gaussian case. And it's the same to do a deviation of the empirical measure. Then you need to do at least of order n changes, okay? Because if you do a finite if you change a finite number of entries, you will not change the empirical measure, again by Weyl interlacing. You need to create of order n big entries. All of them will have this kind of probability, and so at the end you arrive to n times n alpha over 2. So that's the speed. Okay, but so you see that the mechanism to create this kind of large deviation is very different.
So when alpha is 2, so in the Gaussian case, the rates are, I mean, this is the right order, but the event is not the same.
No. So the way to create, yeah, that's true.
So when you get to 2, you need to change the whole chunk of the matrix.
Yeah. So somehow if you think about what we saw, when we are doing large deviation for the Gaussian, we are just changing one eigenvalue. The eigenvector stays the same. So it means that you are going to change a bit all the entries, but by a very small quantity, because the orthogonal matrix is going to have entries of order 1 over square root of n. So the mechanism here is very different. The best strategy is really to have big entries. And so then the question was, what can we do about sub-Gaussian? So sub-Gaussian on compact. And so there are still a lot of open problems there, but what?
Alpha larger than 2.
Alpha is equal to 2.
Sub-Gaussian faster than
Sub-Gaussian, so I'm going to define what is a sub-Gaussian. So sub-Gaussian, it includes many things. So I look at the Laplace transform. That's the best. Okay, so I need to multiply by square root of n if I want. And I want this to be bounded by t squared over 2, and there will be some constant a. Okay, so that's sub-Gaussian. So this includes, of course, compact. This includes Gaussian. And so, of course, the trick over there doesn't work, and as Gérard was saying, we get some bounds, but it's not clear at all that they will be optimal. So the first theorem that I had with Jonathan Husson, so it's quite recent, I think it's 19. So let me add, so here I will take this. Okay, I need to take the same covariance as the GOE, so I need to take 2 on the diagonal. And so assume you can take, so this is for all t. So assume you can take a equal to 1. Okay, so a equal to 1 is the smallest possible value, because when t is small, you know that you have this kind of estimate. So assume a equal to 1, and so this includes Radmacher.
You assume the variance is 1?
Yes. So here so it's I take the same variance as GOE. That's why I take Radmacher or uniform, so it's working. But it doesn't work, for instance, when you take sparse model like this. So if you multiply a Gaussian by a 0, 1, it will not, A will be bigger. And then the lambda max satisfies a large deviation principle, and the rate function is the same as for the GOE. So you have some kind of universality. And honestly, I mean, even until we proved it, I had no intuition. So that's the nice thing with a mathematician; they can prove things without any intuition. But at least, I mean, if you have some universality, since this class includes Gaussian, then you should expect that it's the same Gaussian. And actually, when I prepared the course, I mean, there is, of course, the same question for the empirical measure. But for the empirical measure, actually, it will not be true. And I just realized this. So the remark is that, so if you take Radmacher, so if you take all the xij to be plus 1 over square root of n, okay, so you just look at this event. For Radmacher, this will have probability, so it's 2 minus n and minus 1 n plus 1 over 2. And when you have just a matrix with entries plus 1 everywhere, so you have one eigenvalue which is square root of n and all other zeros. So the spectral measure then is close to the Dirac mass at 0. Okay, but if you look at the rate function I add, so it includes this log term. Okay, so it will be infinite. Okay, as soon as you have an atom, your rate function is infinite. So in this case, so if you have Radmacher on trees, you will not have the same large deviation than for the Gaussian, but it's open to find okay. And so what we could prove also, I mean, of course, then you want to understand what happens in the case where a is greater than 1. So it's with Husson and Augéry. Okay, it should be Augéry. Then, so what we cannot get a full large deviation principle, but we can get these estimates for large enough or small enough, eventually small enough y. So plus some technical assumptions. So then we can prove that the probability that the lambda max is close to y, so this is going to be some I, which depends eventually on the law of the entries, for y big enough. And what is important is that it's not going to be the same thing as the GOE, because when y goes to infinity, this is going to behave like this. So it depends on A.
But do you know if for given A, all the same? Or
No, it depends on the law. So actually, it depends. So also what we have. So if A is smaller than 2 plus some technical assumption, then we know that we have the same thing for y small enough. For y small enough, and then you have so greater than 2, and then you have that the rate function is the same as the GOE. So in fact the point,
you know, A's or I'm lost here. Are you talking about the lambda max again? Or?
yeah. But A is this constant. So I'm just saying we have general result for big enough deviations, but in the case where A is smaller than 2, and we have some technical assumptions, so basically it's working, for instance, on sparse Gaussian. Then we have also large deviation for y small enough, and then the rate function is the same as the GOE. So what you can see when you look at the proof, and I will give you the proof of this, but not the proof of this because it starts to be a bit involved, is that the mechanism is going to somehow transfer from the mechanism of the GOE to the mechanism of heavy tail, in the sense that when you're in this situation, the way to create the deviation is really delocalized. But here, it's going to localize, but weakly, more weakly than in this case. And it's going to localize only for y big enough. So you have really a transition, and that's why somehow we don't have still a full large deviation principle. So you have to understand what happens in between, and that's that's a bit technical.
What is the role of A exactly? I mean, it seems that it is constant.
Yeah, it's a constant, but so it has to be true for all t.
For all t,
Yeah. So somehow the idea is that so if you if A is equal to 1, you don't have any interest to have large entries. But if A is big, you can see that maybe you have interest to have big entries somehow. The tail is the probability is bigger, and you have a transition between these two phenomena.
But the variance was fixed to 1, that's what it means.
Yeah.
For x.
Yeah. The variance. So this is for all ij. Yes.
I see. Now we just brought it back to this case.
Yeah. Yeah. There is some kind of transition between these two phenomena.
And you have a large deviation for the empirical measure?
No, that's what I said. I mean.
Okay, in any case, I mean, I don't know, something nice like this one, but alpha larger than 2. I don't have any capital smooth density like this, but
I think we have lots of upper bounds, but yeah, we have upper bounds, but the upper bounds are maybe not sharp. And yeah. So before I give you an idea of the proof, I would like to tell you the last result. Yes, maybe also I should say something, which is that this new ideas that we introduced with Jonathan were used in many other contexts. Actually, even in Gaussian context, it gives new results. So there is a very nice article by Jonathan where I consider, so you have a variance profile. So this means that the xij are independent, but the covariance depend on the site. And actually, he has a condition on the profile so that you get the large deviation principle, and in fact, it can show also that our techniques do not always work. So I mean, there is also kind of very nice question around this. There was Ben McKenna. We consider, so it's D plus Wigner, so it's, let's say, Rademacher. So also here it's, so we call this sharp when A is equal to 1, we call this sharp subversion. In the sense that it matches right. And so all these results are for sharp subversion. We are doing the multi-D, multi-dimensional generalization. We can also do the largest eigenvalue for models of this kind. Okay, and we have some work where we try to get large deviation for this kind of model for the empirical measure, but it's only partial.
DU is random unitary?
Yes, or orthogonal. They are deterministic and their empirical measure is converging. Yeah. So the point is that, I mean, our goal would be really to show this for Rademacher, but we don't know how to do it. But our techniques can be somehow applied to get at least some kind of large deviation principle for this guy. So if you would like to do the K largest eigenvalue, the joint large deviation. Yes. And also, yes, I know that Antoine and Giulio are also working on a model where you have a variance profile for V-sharp. So yes, so it's a nice technique. So the nice thing with this is that I have been working on dimer kind of problem on the article are getting bigger and bigger. It's like 200 pages, but with these ideas you get like 15 pages article, which are pretty cool. And so I advertise the subject. Okay, so so maybe the last thing I want to advertise is a large deviation for one-dimensional perturbation. So this is a thing that is used by
Just back to this thing, you said the empirical measure for this
yeah.
coordinate orbit, and then this thing,
Yeah.
it's in square, correct?
Yeah, it's in square, but we don't get it for all measures. So that's yeah. So what about so the last result is now you want to look at xn plus xn theta, which is xn plus theta e transpose. Here we go back to GOE. Okay. So again, here you don't know a priori the joint law of the eigenvalues because you have this perturbation, but you can. So the theorem is that so it's MIDA 0.5. So you have a large deviation for the lambda max of xn theta. And actually more recently with Biroli, so we did the joint. So I imagine it was again motivated by this problem coming from statistical learning. So you look at your largest eigenvalue, eigenvector corresponding to this, and you look at the scalar product with E. Okay, so we can do the large deviation for this couple. Okay, so it's the same type of result, but for a tilted. For yes. Yeah, I mean you see it already here. And here you have actually a nice phenomenon which occurs, which is that when you condition U to have some values, you can see that the best strategy will be that the second eigenvalue pops up out of the bulk, but not for all U. So you have kind of yes. Okay. So you know, so when you look at this rate function, actually it's given as a supremum, and it involves also the second eigenvalue. And you can see that for some values of u, the best scenario is that your second eigenvalue will stick to the bulk, or will go out of the bulk. So, but this is of course when when you look, so it depends on the, and thanks to Julio, there is a very nice drawing of the rate function in our papers. Okay, so I would like to give you some idea on how you prove this, and actually they both this kind of theorem and the universality theorem I stated are based on what we call spherical integrals. Yes.
Can I just ask about the theorem for A is equal to 1? So you need to assume that all the entries are at the same distribution, or can you vary it as long as
No, it does. It can vary provided they all have the same bound,
Okay.
and they have the same covariance as the QE. For instance, we don't know how to do if you don't have 2 and the covariance 2. So maybe with the result of Jonathan later on, but our proof, our first paper at least really requires.
So you need to, the important thing is to keep the covariance to the one value.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe I can show you the spherical integrals. So it's something, so now you have xn, which is a deterministic, so maybe I should put E. So it's a deterministic it's a deterministic matrix, and I look at what happens when I look at the Laplace transform of En evaluated in the direction E, where E is uniform on the sphere. So it's, and I take 1. Otherwise I wouldn't put the N. Okay, so I mean this kind of objects are I think quite important, and all these results are really based on their analysis. You can think about them as kind of a bit kind of Laplace transform for matrices. That's a way to think about it. And so why is it important? So for instance, if you look at this on how you would prove this kind of result, what I claim is that the density of the eigenvalue will depend on this guy. So why? So if I look at the probability that xn theta, so this is going to be exponential, so I had minus n over 4, and I have the trace of, so it's xn theta minus this guy, theta E transpose. So actually I can forget about that. Oh, I forgot the square. Okay, so that's the law of the entries. And so when I expand, I will have the Gaussian weight, and then I will get n over 2, so the trace of xn times E transpose, but this is just the scalar product. And I have theta. Okay, so that's the density. Now remember that what we are interested in is the joint law of the eigenvalues. Okay? So what I know is that I can write xn as this orthogonal matrix times the diagonal eigenvalue. And so when I do the change of variable, what I will have to do is to integrate over this orthogonal matrix. So P theta of the eigenvalues. So this is going to be, so I have the same thing as before. I have also my Jacobian. And here, so I have this orthogonal matrix and I multiply it by E. So when I am going to integrate over O, this means that E is going to take the uniform law on the sphere. So this is exactly this guy. Okay. So here I integrated over O because nothing else was depending on it. So what you see that what you would like is to understand the behavior of this guy when n goes to infinity, and again do like kind of Laplace method. Okay, and so the theorem that I got with Millen is that so if En is a deterministic matrix and you assume that the empirical measure converges towards some mu, and you assume that the largest eigenvalue, so theta is non-negative, is converging towards some y, then this will converge towards some, so it's g and mu y and theta as n goes to infinity. And you have an explicit formula for this guy. So g of mu y and theta. So I can put the formula, but it's not very important. So you have some formula, and the point is that somehow the important point, so the important point is that it will depend on y, provided theta is large enough. Okay, you would believe that this kind of quantity will depend on the largest eigenvalue. If theta is very big, what you under your measure here, your E wants to align with the eigenvector for the largest eigenvalue to maximize this. Okay, so you would believe that somehow you have this kind of transition that for theta big enough, your E wants to align on this eigenvector, and the answer will depend on the largest eigenvalue, and this is what is going on, what we proved. Okay. So in the notes I give actually a short proof. So with I'm not going to prove it in detail. I mean, there are some ideas in the notes. It's not very complicated. The main point to do that is to get representation of.
Is the quality of this convergence doesn't depend really on the empirical measure of the n, except that you just need to have the mu and the y. How fast?
No, but here it depends.
No, I understand. But what I mean is that En will, for us, finally, the empirical measure of n will be the spectrum. So
it
you
needs
to understand, or you don't use how fast it converges.
Yes, when I'm going to prove this, I need to use that the empirical measure converge faster than n, exponential minus n. Otherwise, this would give another contribution. So yes, that's what we need, but this we have it for free in general because of concentration of measure, whatever. Okay, so just an idea that you can see you have some representation, for instance, in terms of Gaussian, or the GI or Gaussian. And so when you look at E, En, E, you can see that this is going to have the same distribution as the lambda I gi square. So these are the eigenvalues divided by the sum of gi square. Okay, on here you come back to, so you are asking what is the probability that this guy is close to something and this guy is close to something. And this is kind of classical estimate that you can get by large deviation. I mean, it's independent variables, and so you can get this result like this. Actually, with Jonathan, now we have kind of shorter proofs. At least when En has finitely many, actually the proof that I gave in the notes, many different atoms. Then you can see that the sum, so your scalar product, so this will be sum of this lambda I, which are the eigenvalues, and then you have to sum the entries, J and J in some ensemble, and actually you can get the joint law of these guys. It's just a beta law. And then getting large deviations for estimating this kind of probability is very easy. So it's in the notes. And so, but once, so how do you conclude? For instance, to get this result, what you see that we are there. And so you can do exactly as before to get this kind of result. If you have enough continuity of your spherical integral, what you see that the probability that the lambda max is close to y. So this is going to be, and here as Gérard was saying, you use that the empirical measure is close to sigma, and with a probability which is much smaller, which is much larger than exponential minus n, so it's something like this, for kappa small enough. So you do that, and you want to get the estimate. So this, you can replace your empirical measure by sigma. You condition by the fact that your largest eigenvalue is close to y. And so what you see that this will be like exponential n g of sigma y and theta. I never know in which order I put them. And then I have the same thing as before. So this thing was just giving the right function for the GOE. Okay, so from here you get the large deviation principle in a straightforward way. Okay, so just maybe in 10 minutes I will give you some argument to prove universality, because this is kind of the most recent work. And strangely enough, it uses, well, strangely, it uses also this spherical integral. And maybe you have some question about that.
Yes.
Yes.
So you see the behavior of this large deviation function at the right theta, at the critical, it has the right.
The right, you can see the BBP transition by looking indeed at the minimizer.
I'm wondering about something funnier, that is the fluctuation we are just getting out. We find the derivative of this large deviation function at the, and we are just at the transition.
So you would like to do a CLT or just sit at the level of the?
No, of course, informally,
Yeah.
to see if we can guess that the fluctuations are still in the scale of precision.
I think it should be doable, yeah. But this should be, the fluctuation should be Gaussian, no?
No, they are Gaussian when you are away from.
Ah, yes, so you mean when you look really close to 2.
Just
Yeah.
they are this modified precision, these
Yeah,
things. So at least the scale should be visible.
Yeah, that's true. Other questions? Okay, so I'm just going to give you a last idea about how to prove large deviation and how we proved all this universality result. And the idea is really more at the heart of what people are doing in large deviation, which is to tilt the measure. So namely, in large deviation, so the argument we had is just we do Laplace method. So that's something you can see you want to maximize your somehow your density. There is another argument which is often to see, well, I can see what is the best scenario to do this deviation, and I'm going to compute the probability. So it's more combinatorics. But in large deviation theory, a lot of proofs were given by tilting. So the idea is that you change the density of your probability measure so that you are going to create the desired deviation. Okay, so how does it go? So you want, so let me go to this Rademacher, okay, for instance, Rademacher, so it's sharp sub-Gaussian matrices. So now, and I want to remind you, now I don't have any formula for the joint Lobs eigenvalue. But so what I'm going to say, I want to look at the probability that I have some deviation of my maximum eigenvalue. And I'm going to do a tilt by this spherical integral. And then, okay, so you multiply and you divide by the same thing, so hopefully you didn't do anything. And now I'm going to use the fact that I have this limit. Okay, I have this limit here. I know that under this measure I still have a very strong convergence of my spectral measure, like I said in what I erased, faster than exponential n. So I can see that this term is kind of constant, and it's going to be given by this limit. So it's going to be this g of sigma, and I have y and theta. And here I keep my spherical integral. And I still have my my probability that the lambda max is close to some y. Okay, so far I just said that this I know is more or less fixed on my event. Okay, and now I have this indicator function, I can forget it. So I have the upper bound, y theta. And now I'm taking, so here is what the expectation over E, here on x, and so I have the expectation of x on E of exponential n theta over 2 E x n E. Okay, and so now I want to compute this. Okay, so lemma is that so if so a is equal to 1, and here it's important that a is equal to 1, otherwise it's wrong. You can get the limit of this guy. And so this will be theta square over 2. Okay, so imagine that you have proved this, then you get an upper bound. Okay, then so this is bounded by exponential minus n g of sigma y theta plus n over 2 theta square asymptotically. And at the end of the day, you have the choice of theta, so you can optimize over theta.
You completely rid of the lambda max mu y.
Yeah, here it's an upper bound. Yeah, that's the usual trick that you get rid of it and then you have to show that this is optimal. So then you can optimize over theta, and so it's g sigma y theta minus theta square over 2. And so you can check then that this is going to be the IGOE. I mean, it's some computation, but it's kind of a miracle, but yes. And so maybe I prove this, and this is really what the place where you see somehow the way it's working under our assumption. So the point is that when you compute this expectation, here it's nice because you have just something linear in x. So you can compute over x this expectation for a given e. So if you want to prove this, maybe I do this. Can say that this is the expectation over e, and then you take the expectation over x, so it's linear, so it's a product over I smaller than j. And here you have exponential n theta over 2, you have ei ej, so you have 2 if I is different from j, and you have xij. Okay, and then you use your assumption because you have the Laplace transform of your entry. And so this is just exponential, so you should put the, so it's 2i different from j, so it's 4. Oh, so I have a 2. Okay, so you have to remember that what? So the xij, that the covariance 1 over n, so you should have only a square root of n here, so it's, n will come, you have theta square, and it should be 2 of 1 of I think I different from j, ei square, eg square. I think this is what you find. So with the covariance, so the idea is that at the end you will get the sum. So you should do exactly what you want, so that at the end what you get is the sum of ei square square. Yes. I mean that's so you choose the covariance so that this is okay, because this is 1. And so you get the upper bound.
But if you had a non-strict or non-sharp such out there, you would just have an A here.
Yeah, but then you would not match a lower bound. That's
Give us a lower bound.
I'm going to give you the lower bound. I give you the lower bound. So of course, all the game is to do the lower bound. So here it was okay, and the point is that so for the lower bound, what you do is that you concentrate on small e. So you need something n minus 1/4 minus kappa for some kappa which is small but positive. And the point is that when you do that, then when you look at it here, so you should think always that somehow here you have a square root of n, this is of order 1, and here you have a square root of n. So when you multiply square root of n by ei eg, it's going to be small on this event. So you can expand your Laplace transform next to the origin. And then you have the same thing. Okay, so when you do that, what you will get is something like this. So expand at the origin. All right, and so the only thing that you have to notice here is that the probability that this EI or smaller than this is going to go to 1 as soon as kappa is smaller than 1/4, because somehow the entries of uniformly taken vector are going to be of order 1 over square root of n typically, and you can prove that it's so this is going to be like exponential n theta square over 2. So if I have a, I have the upper bound with the a, but I have the lower bound without the a. So actually we have a limit, and the limit is much more complicated. And the point is that the limit, when theta is large enough, so it will really have scenarios on DEI, and DEI will eventually concentrate. So that's the place where you can see the transition. Okay, so just a last word to get the lower bound. So at least here I prove that I get the large deviation upper bound. So then you need to prove the lower bound. So that's always the case. And so if you do exactly like here, but here you don't have the right to forget this indicator function. Okay, so you do exactly the same thing. So what you will get is exponential n theta square over 2. You will get the minus n g of sigma theta y. But here you have to keep that. So when you did this this tilt, so when you did this tilt, this thing is not going to be too small. So the question is, so there exists theta, so that this is going to be bounded by, let's say, 1/2 from large n. If this is okay, then you are done. And so what we prove is that, so it's enough to prove that for each EI, which is, like we said, minus 1/4 minus kappa, what we prove is that under the measure which is tilted by this in this direction, okay, so for each of these E, actually uniformly, this will go to 1. So this will go to 1, of course, if you choose y wisely, and the point is that y should be theta plus 1 over theta. Okay, so so uniformly on this, and this is enough to prove that this is also going to 1. On y, so again, it's an easy law because it's a linear change of variable. Okay, and so if you look at the xij, they will still be independent under this shifted law. And the point is that, so if you look under this tilt, maybe I could write it here. So under this tilted law, you can compute the mean and the covariance. And you can see that the mean is approximately going to be, so the mean of xi, okay, for the distribution now is something like this, theta ei ej xij, and you add your distribution. And you can see that the mean under this law is approximately theta ei j, whereas the covariance is approximately 1 over n. So what does this mean? It means that when you have tilt, when you have changed your distribution, your matrix looks like x theta, like a Wigner matrix plus theta E transpose. Okay, and here of course I use the fact that this guy was small to compute to say this kind of thing, and then I can just use a BBP transition to say, well, under these new laws, my largest eigenvalue is going to converge to theta plus 1 over theta. So that's somehow the
The thing is, in order to have the lambda max at y, it's as if I put the thing in a position such that this becomes the BDP
Yeah.
eigenvalue.
yeah, it's really
that's the most probable then.
Yeah, that's the point, that somehow the scenario to achieve this optimal deviation is really to look like a matrix with a signal, with a spike. And the way to do that is to change the density, because how would you make, you know, a matrix with plus minus 1 entries create this kind of vector? It's absolutely unclear. And the point is really that by tilting the measure, you can do that. And so so if you compare to what is going on when a is bigger than 1, all here you have to see what is going to be the main contribution in this kind of annealed spherical integral. And in general, the E can concentrate. And this creates a problem all over, of course. So the idea that the eigenvectors related with the maximum eigenvalue will also concentrate. So you have really a phase transition in this phenomenon. Okay, I think I gave you quite a lot of proofs, and we are all tired with proofs. And so thank you very much for your attention.
Lectures, so they will not be staying with us the second week. Alice told me she's leaving tonight and Gerard will leave tomorrow. So if you want to discuss with them, tell them something you didn't have the chance to this afternoon is your last chance, so please